Hey guys, thanks for checking the video out. This is Fix It in the Mix, where I'm going to take some common mix issues that we would maybe have in a recording and focus on how we can make the most of them. We've all had a session where we've got to polish a turd, as it were. Sometimes you can't re-record, sometimes you can't go back and get the best take, sometimes you can't go back and get the sound the way you want to have it. So we're going to be focusing on plugins that really solve an issue, that can really get you out of a hole and can fix that problem that you have in a mix. First of all, we're going to take a look at an old favourite. This is drum spill. So the thing you need to understand about drum spill is that it's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just that the ratio between the spill and the actual instrument you want is slightly misaligned. So instead of trying to get rid of that drum spill completely, we're going to focus on trying to amplify the actual instrument, trying to improve the actual instrument itself. And by doing that, the drum spill will be negligible. It won't be as much of an issue. It will just sit back in the background. Let's check it out. So let's take a listen to this snare drum on its own and identify what the issue is, and then we'll see what we've done to it and how we can really bring out the good parts of it. Okay, it's not terrible, but as we progress throughout the song, we get more spill and we get more cymbals. It's obvious that it was a live recording, so you get some kind of nonsense going on. This just strengthens the idea that you don't want to get rid of the spill entirely. If you did, you would slam a gate on it and that would be it. Don't like gates, not going to go into it. But we really want to just accentuate what is there. So I'm going to play you now what we ended up with, and I'll play it in the mix of the drums as well, so you can see exactly how it's changed things. So you'll hear on this snare drum, as I bring the plugins on and off, it's not actually changing the spill, if at all. It's kind of just leaving that the same. So I'm using Neutron for this, and I'm using 3 modules, which we're going to get into. But as I just bring the plugin off and on, just listen to the spill and hear that it's not really actually changing. It's just the snare that's changing. That's the bit we want to fix. Okay, cool. So let's jump into it then. So what we've got here is an equalizer, a transient shaper, and a compressor. And clearly I've already mixed this, but I'm going to go through exactly what I've done and, more importantly, why. Now, these 2 bands here are just about the resonances, just about the little bit of nonsense that's kind of come up just as I've added the compressor. They're not anything crazy, so I'm not going to go into them too much. What I really want to go into is these 2 bands here. So this is adding some low end and some high end. And it's not just about the EQ plugin, this is about what we're doing afterwards. So I'll play it to you before that EQ plugin is engaged with none of the other modules on, and you'll hear exactly what it's doing. So with the EQ, without. So it's just giving a little bit of a lift. It's just giving a little bit of low end and it's giving a little bit of top end. This is not where the heavy lifting is taking place. This is just gradually kind of shaping stuff. These here, as I said, are just the resonances. So if I turn these off, then you'll hear just a little bit of a ring coming through. Hear that ring? And we're just getting rid of those rings a small amount. We're not looking at removing them completely, because what tends to happen when you try and get rid of a resonance like that is there's so many harmonics going on there, and there's more intricacies to the sound than you kind of initially realize. So taking out and focusing on that ring is actually going to be detrimental to the rest of the sound. So if I were to have taken out too much of this, then this boost would kind of get ruined a little bit because we're taking out all of that bottom end. So we're not going to be doing that too much. But this EQ is really about overall tone shaping. We're solving a problem by getting rid of that ring a small amount, and then it's tone shaping to move on to the next stage. So this is what I think is doing the majority of the heavy lifting. This is the transient shaper. Listen to it without and then listen to it with. And this is the one that is really improving the sound of the actual snare drum itself. This is the one that is really fixing it. The spill doesn't really change. The snare drum itself, that's the thing that changes. That's the bit that we're focusing on. So what I'm doing here is I'm using the transient shaper to shape the overall attack of certain frequency bands. I've split this into 3 frequency bands: the low end, the mid-range, and the high end. The mid-range is not doing anything. No boost on the sustain, no boost on the attack. The top end has got a load of attack boosted and a load of sustain taken away. I just want the initial snap. If I'm adding a load of top end to this using the attack, then by doing so, I'm probably going to be adding some of the hi-hat spill as well. If I didn't have this sustain down, then we would hear a bit more of the kind of stick attack on the hi-hat as well. I'll just bring that sustain back up so you can hear. Just kind of opens it up slightly and just means that we're not going to be getting too much of that hi-hat when we bring it down. Importantly though, because there's not too much kind of splashy hi-hat going on here, it's not a massive issue, but later on in the track, as we heard, there's more hi-hat, more chances for spill. So we're just covering our own back by bringing that sustain down. The attack is really where the kind of magic is happening. So we're adding some snap. We're making it so that the high end comes through on the initial hit, and that's the important one. Then we're doing something similar with the low end, but we're not bringing the sustain down. Sustain on low end can often kind of kill the sound because low end will resonate for a bit longer, and it's the kind of body of the sound. It's not just the initial hit, it's the overall sound of the snare drum. If I were to bring down the sustain, kind of killing it a little bit. So just by having it up there, it's just meaning that we're getting a kind of natural snare sound. And this attack is really the big one. If I take this back down to 0 and then bring it up, you're going to hear the body of that drum just come to life. It's nothing without it. It's starting. Again, it's not solving the spill. We're leaving the spill alone. We're just concentrating on the instrument itself, the snare drum. So this is the real heavy lifting kind of thing. And then the compressor, typically when we've got some spill on a drum track, if we're compressing it, it's just a no-no because we're going to be adding a load of level to that low end stuff. But because we've accentuated the attack of the low end and the high end, we're bringing that up. So when the threshold of the compressor is kind of telling the signal to compress, it's not actually affecting the spill at all because the spill is too low level. It's only affecting the transients. So this compressor is doing fairly little, but importantly, I'm not affecting the top end. Even if it were to get compressing on a little bit of the spill, we're not compressing that high end. I like the high end works. So I'm just compressing from, where is this, 5K downwards, just adding a little bit of body to it. Just take a listen. That's without it. Just adds a little bit of girth to it. And we're kind of shaping the sustain of that as well with the release, just keeping that nice and short so we're not getting too much coming through afterwards. So that when the compressor actually releases, we're not going to be compressing for too long. It's just snapping straight back down again. So a snare drum is really a fantastic example of something you're going to need to fix in the mix. It's so close to that hi-hat. It's so close to the cymbals. It's often the place where you get ring, where you get just general nastiness. If you've not got a well-tuned snare, a nice new head, so many variables go into a snare drum sound that the initial idea is that you can just kind of reach for a sample. But I love samples. Samples are great. I've got my own drum sample pack, just to let you know about that. But samples are kind of to accelerate the sound, to amplify the sound, to make it better. If we've already got a good sounding snare drum as we have here, there are ways and means to kind of get around the issue so we don't necessarily have to reach for a sample. There's plenty of times that I would reach for a sample, but here we can fix this snare drum. It's got potential. We don't need to worry about the spill being too much of an issue. We're taking what is good about the snare drum and just amplifying that. The transient shaper really is going to be your key ingredient to getting a great snare sound out of something that needs fixing in the mix. Thanks so much for checking it out. I'll see you again soon. Take care.